Hello, welcome. This is Business 100, Chapter 2, video quiz. My name is Dr. Yoey. We'll get started. Now, the first thing we have here is what they call the chapter forecast, gives you an idea of kind of what's in this chapter. And here we're talking about the role of ethics and what they're calling social responsibility in business decision making. First, we're going to define business ethics. We're going to go over a list of definitions. I'll talk about them in a little bit more detail, and then we're going to hopefully understand the importance of ethics in the role of business. Then we'll explore a number of business ethics issues to help you learn to recognize such issues when they arise. Okay, we're not going to go over the whole chapter here, but we are going to go over some definitions and important parts for the video quiz. Back here, learning objectives. These are good things to make sure that you know these learning objectives for this chapter. Define business ethics, social responsibility, examine their importance, detect some of the ethical issues that may arise in business, specify how businesses can promote ethical behavior, explain the 4 dimensions of social responsibility, debate an organization's social responsibilities to owners, employees, consumers, the environment, and the community. Now here we're going to start off with some definitions and terms. The first one they have there is bribes. Payments, gifts, or special favors intended to influence the outcome of a decision. These can range anywhere from little small gifts all the way up to large cash payments. Business ethics, principles and standards that determine acceptable conduct in a business. Oftentimes, you will have certain standards or ethics that you will be required to adhere to. This acceptable behavior can be determined by the organization, stakeholders and interest groups, competitors. They could get together, establish a institute or an organization that sets up business standards in their particular industry, government regulators, the public, and the individual's personal principles. Codes of ethics are formalized rules and standards that describe what a company expects of its employees. Now, these again could be related back to those business ethics we talked about a second ago. You might have industry-wide standards on acceptable ethics. Lawyers, you have this. The Bar Association, for example, says that lawyers can't advertise themselves as being better or worse than their competitors for a particular legal service. So I couldn't get on there and say, oh, I'm better at doing divorces than Joe Smith is. That is in a code of ethics, a formalized set of rules. If I were to do that, I could be brought up before a bar and lose my license to practice law, get disbarred. Consumerism, the activities that independent individuals, groups, and organizations undertake to protect their rights as consumers. So, for example, there might be consumer groups set up, such as maybe the Better Business Bureau that might say, oh, if we deal with a business, they take advantage of us in some way, we're going to band together and protect our rights to not be victims of fraud or some other misdealings. Corporate citizenship, the extent to which businesses meet the legal, ethical, economic, and voluntary responsibilities placed on them by their, let me fix this for a minute so you can see it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste it. I'm back. I had to fix that slide. Corporate citizenship is the extent to which businesses meet the legal, ethical, economic, and voluntary responsibilities placed on them by their stakeholders. One good example of this would be a manager's or a executive's fiduciary responsibility to their investors. Investors are clearly stakeholders in the business, and you, as a manager in a corporation, have a fiduciary responsibility to act in the best interest of those shareholders, which typically means to act in a way that protects their investment and maximizes the return on their investment or stock price. So, for example, I worked for the banks. When I worked for the banks, um, clearly, when the housing crisis was going on, a lot of loans were being made that weren't good loans. People in the media and in finance started to discover this. And they went to a man named Jamie Dimon, who was head of JP Morgan Chase Bank, one of the largest banks in the country. And I worked for the banks. We knew there were a lot of bad loans being made that weren't going to be repaid. And they went to Jamie Dimon and said, "Hey, are you going to keep making these subprime mortgage loans, these bad loans?" And Jamie Dimon has a famous quote where he says, "Yes, as long as the music keeps playing, we're going to dance." And what he meant by that was that the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States was creating bank deposits out of thin air, buying government debt with them to finance deficits that the US government was running. And this was creating money, lowering interest rates, and flooding financial markets with loanable funds. The banks had taken these as deposits, they had to pay interest on them. And of course, if they take deposits, they have to earn money to pay that interest to the depositors out of. So what Morgan was saying here was, as long as the Fed keeps pumping the money into the system, we have to use that money and go out and make loans. And if we've made all the good loans out there and there's still money left, we're going to lend it out and make bad loans. Now, you could ask yourself if that was good corporate citizenship, if by making loans that they knew weren't going to be repaid and would become losses later, was Jamie Dimon and other bank managers, other bank executives, CEOs, etc., were they meeting their responsibilities to, in this case, the stakeholders, the shareholders, and the depositors who put money into those banks? That would be an example of corporate citizenship. Good or bad, of course, would be sort of your opinion on that. Now, an ethical issue is an identifiable problem, situation, or opportunity that requires a person to choose from among several actions that may be evaluated as right or wrong, ethical or unethical. An example of this, I worked for a bank again, and we had another banker who was selling basically what was an investment product called an annuity to people who were not, that she knew were not going to use the money for retirement. During the housing boom, a lot of people sold their houses, said, "Hey, if you're willing to pay me $100,000 more than what I owe on the thing for the house, I'll sell it to you and I'll take the money." And they were taking this $100,000 or close to it that they made on selling their houses, and they would come into the bank and say, "Hey, I want to put this money away for a while to earn some interest on it until housing markets rationalize. My house wasn't worth $200,000. It was worth $100,000. I sold it for $200,000. I'm going to save this $100,000, and then when housing prices come back down again, I'm going to use it to basically go back and buy my house or buy a house just like it." Well, An annuity is a retirement product. You get money, you put it into an annuity, you give it to an insurance company. They use the money, they pay you a fixed rate of interest on this particular type of annuity, and you can withdraw the money starting at 62 and a half without penalty. But if you try to withdraw the money before you turn 62 and a half, there's a 10% fee charged on that and a 10% withholding tax. So she was selling these annuities to people that she shouldn't sell them to. Now, was that right or wrong? Of course, it was wrong. It was unethical. It was fraud. She was a fraud. Now, I had this dilemma. I knew that this person was doing these things. So I went to my boss and said, I'm getting all these people coming back to withdraw their money because they want to go buy houses or they want to just check on their balances. And they come to me and find out they bought an annuity that we don't have the money and that there's going to be a 10% penalty and 10% withdrawal holding on this, which she didn't tell them. She told them it was just like a savings account. This is wrong and unethical. Now, going back to corporate citizenship, I worked for Wells Fargo at the time, and Wells Fargo has had serious problems dealing with ethical issues. When I did this, my boss looked at me square in the eye and said, "Do you like your job?" Now, Wells Fargo, in my view, was clearly not exhibiting what they're calling good citizenship. They were doing illegal things, selling annuities to people without fully informing them of what they were getting. It was unethical. It is wrong to take somebody's money that they want to use to buy a house and tie it up till they're 62 and a half without penalty. I took upon myself the voluntary responsibility to report them, and they did nothing. Okay. Now, these things were a violation of business ethics, principles and standards that determine acceptable conduct in the business. We were told by the trainers, the people that came in and trained us on selling these products, and we were licensed to sell them. And in both cases, it was wrong to do what that person did. It violated formalized rules and standards that the company said they expected of their employees. Yet, the bank didn't do anything and, in essence, threatened me to keep my mouth shut. Plagiarism, we all know about that. That's the act of taking someone else's work and presenting it as your own without mentioning the source. This last phrase here is something new, a social responsibility, a business's obligation to maximize its positive impact and minimize its negative impact on society. A reasonable way to look at this is that a business should maximize its possible positive impact on society by one, producing goods and services that maximize its profit. We can make the world a better place if we take things that are worth less, inputs, land, labor, capital goods, that we talked about in chapter 1, and turning them into things that are worth more to our fellow man. When we do this on the free market, consumers will pay more, let's say, for our cell phones, than we have to bid to buy all the things that go into them. Now, as long as there are not costs imposed onto others in the form of pollution, in the form of property rights violations, then we've made the world a better place and fulfilled our social responsibility. On the other hand, if we are producing things that aren't worth what people think they're worth. We're defrauding them. We're producing shoddy material. Then we may not be meeting this social responsibility. Or if we're imposing costs onto others or hiding costs on our books, that would not be minimizing our negative impact on society. The next thing we've got here, another term used in this chapter, is sustainability. Here, conducting activities in a way that allows for the long-term well-being of the natural environment, including all biological entities. Sustainability involves the assessment and improvement of business strategies, economic sectors, work practices, technologies, and lifestyles so that they maintain the health of the natural environment. Now, sustainability issues, according to your book, include pollution. And we could look at water pollution. If we are putting things into the water that pollute it and make it unusable for other people, if we aren't incurring the cost of that, say we're polluting someone else's water, that, and they're having to pay the cost by not being able to drink it, then there we could have an ethical issue, we could have legal issues, and we wouldn't be filling this sustainability criterion. Air pollution, land pollution, these are all things that could be included here. Now, what I want to point out here is that all processes in life and in business, in nature, they all produce waste products. Okay? That is a given. And a waste product in and of itself isn't a bad thing. Okay? Where we have pollution in this case, or problems, is where these waste products don't get put in the right place or the best place. You've all heard that old saying that a bear, you know what's in the woods, right? Now, the feces from a bear is a waste product. If the bear does it in the woods, it's not a problem. That's where bear feces go. If they put it on your front porch or somewhere else, then we could have pollution. So when we put waste products from our productive activities into the wrong place, that typically constitutes pollution. On a free market where we have property rights in land, air, and water, these issues tend to be minimized because the person disposing of the waste products, say chemical waste, has to pay the cost of any damages he or she does to that land, water, or air. The problems arise where we don't have clear property rights in these things or where we have government control of them. The government, instead of saying, okay, if you pollute the air and it harms another person, they can take a big business to court and sue it and win and recover damages. Instead of doing that, the government regulates how much pollution that these industries can put into the air, and any damages typically are very hard for victims of this pollution to go after the aggressor. Your book talks about alternative energy. Reducing carbon emissions forces alternative energy sources. Now here, does that mean we should go out and use alternative energies like wind or solar? And the answer to that question is no, not in and of themselves. If you go back, when we talked about social responsibility, which sustainability, if it is an objective that should be followed in business, if sustainability is a social responsibility, then our job is to maximize the positive impact and minimize the negative impact on society. Fossil fuels typically are more in line with social responsibility than these alternative sources. The cost, the negative impact to society of using many of them can be higher than the cost, the negative impact on society of using fossil fuels. Now, where pollution or other property rights arise, where the aggressor does not have to pay the cost that is imposed onto another member of society, then we can have problems. And here we've got whistleblowing, the act of an employee exposing an employer's wrongdoing to outsiders, such as the media or government regulatory agencies. Okay. So if, for example, you worked for a company that was illegally or immorally or unethically disposing of waste products, say, in a schoolyard, and you reported that, you would be a whistleblower. Okay. Now, that's the end of this slide. We will have a few test questions. Read the chapters, take the written question test that follows this, and then move on to chapter 3. Thank you. Goodbye.